Right, I'm so excited to bring you my thoughts on that quarter from HIMS because it was just absolutely stellar and has alleviated many of my concerns about the company which I made at the end of last quarter. Now, it's clear the transition is going on in the company from if you have a symptom, here's a pill, let's treat you, to let's keep you healthy. Let's focus on preventative care. Here is our data, here's how we're monitoring you. We're going to ensure you don't get sick. And it is very, very exciting to see. Let's talk about those different growth factors that HIMS mentioned on that call. So we've got the international expansion. Fantastic. Testosterone. We know testosterone was coming for a long time. Whole body lab testing. They really started to discuss a lot about this. Now, we knew that this was also coming from the Tribe acquisition, but we can start to see a lot of color for HIMS vision. And that also goes into what Andrew Dudum was talking about with longevity, which it looks like longevity is going to be launched in 2026 too. Menopause is going to be very meaningful next year. And Dudum also said that his goal one day is to identify and manage risks across all diseases, cancer and heart disease being two of the key ones that end up killing most people in HIMS key markets, and to ultimately build a huge flywheel which can determine risk factors for that and thus prevent it long before the disease actually manifests itself to be life-threatening and ultimately prevent death. And this is where the total addressable market just absolutely balloons, because then you've got something that is structured like a consumer product, but it's also clinically rich enough to power medicine driven by artificial intelligence. So HIMS have got the data, but they've also got the distribution. And that is an exceptionally powerful brand, in the sense that there is not something quite like HIMS where they've got that consumer platform, but at the same time, they're now going after a whole type of unique data set. And they've said that the actual whole body lab testing, which is where the differentials get very, very big in terms of vitamin deficiencies, hormonal imbalances, that sort of thing. So it's coming before year end, meaningful revenue in 2026, but more importantly, meaningful data is going to start flowing. And this is at a point where HIMS are doubling down on investing in tech. They've got vertical integration, and I'm extremely excited about what they are working on long term. Now, I mentioned also that some of my concerns from last quarter have been alleviated, and they weren't so much long-term concerns, but I had a feeling that this may have been a bit of a bad quarter. And to me, it's a very good quarter. Not necessarily quantitatively blowing it out of the water, but that's besides the point. Just the level of ambition and drive and confidence that I'm hearing in these long-term strategies. A management team that fundamentally believe in their mission. They have a huge degree of conviction that it will excel. It was interesting, actually, just a side point. Yemi said, our conviction remains high in our ability to meet or exceed our 2030 target of at least 6.5 billion in revenue. That is a lot. 1.3 billion in adjusted EBITDA. And if HIMS are still growing that insane in that time level, what? You think that they're going to be trading at less than 35 times adjusted EBITDA? Probably not. You think they're going to be trading at less than 8 times sales? Probably not. Both of those ratios would give them a market cap of over 50 billion in 4.5 years, and they're currently at 10 billion at the moment. So, and going back to some of those short-term concerns of mine being alleviated, because when you did strip out GLP-1 revenue and non-GLP-1 revenue, and you think, whoa, HIMS's core revenue is drying up here. GLP-1s are obviously going through some headwinds right now, and there was very little chat about GLP-1s on the earnings call, which I think is smart. They're solely focusing on these huge long-term verticals, and that is ultimately what healthcare should be about. It's all good putting an injection into somebody and say, oh yeah, like now you're not going to be overweight. But the problem is that being overweight is almost a symptom of deeper issues, in the sense that that heavily correlates with things that can kill you. Like being overweight very rarely kills you by itself. However, that can correlate with certain things like diabetes and heart disease, etc. And HIMS are getting closer and closer to preventative healthcare at its core. However, talking about core, obviously that was flat quarter on quarter last year. And Yemi basically says that there were major headwinds in the legacy sexual health category. So I'm assuming a lot of that is generic Viagra or erectile dysfunction medication, because that is it's sort of HIMS's lightest and most generic product, where they don't have so much of a moat. Yes, they sell mints, but I'm assuming that that's what he's referring to, particularly as that's quite a big driver of revenue. So subscribers grew 22% year on year, but excluding that impact of sexual transition, and what he means by transition is they're going from a very basic sort of treatment now moving into testosterone, which is much more comprehensive. Excluding that transition, subscribers in the third quarter would have grown north of 40% year on year, suggesting that in other areas like sleeping health or dermatology, those other more legacy areas of HIMS, there's actually still some really good subscriber growth, which is great. Now, I don't think this will show up in the numbers just yet, but what I did like to see is this was a record quarter. So despite those continued GLP-1 headwinds that HIMS has had to navigate, because, remember that they're trying to build all these beautiful new verticals at a time where GLP-1 has obviously been a big headache for them and obviously taken up a lot of the company's energy. And that is just absolute testament to them. So yeah, they beat on the guidance. 580 was the guidance, 599 was achieved, and they've narrowed the range of revenue for the fourth quarter, which is really, it's good because it's roughly at the midpoint. There were actually two different numbers reported, like Yemi reported something slightly lower than what was on the actual shareholder letter. However, it does give me confidence that they will hit and probably exceed that guidance and are feeling quite confident for 2026, particularly because we've got actual dates on when things will actually materialize in terms of meaningful revenue. I think that if they were losing confidence in that guidance for FY25 or what their guidance would look like going into 2026, I think that they would have started to soften the blow this quarter, and they didn't do that. All they did was narrow the guidance range. So that is exceptionally positive. And as I said earlier, international expansion expected to add 50 million of incremental revenue in the second half of 2025. So there's revenue coming in from there, which I think also really helped the quarter. I'm not sure how much of that is synergized yet, and HIMS have got a lot of, rebranding to do and organization to do, but it's good that there is at least some revenue coming in. Testosterone is going to be very meaningful in 2026. Whole body lab testing, that's already started. In terms of the longevity and the peptides thing, I love the direction that is going towards the preventative healthcare. Peptides is not something that I know a lot about overall, but it's an interesting direction that they're taking it, and that's not going to be meaningful in 2026. But they've said that menopause will be, and that will help hers to get over $1 billion in annualized revenues just next year. So it is an incredible direction that they're taking the company. Think about as they start to obtain this very unique data, the type of flywheel that will create for preventative healthcare. As I said, they've already got that distribution and they've got that platform in place. And now they're going to have an extremely powerful data set to act as a flywheel. If HIMS can pull it off, this company could be worth hundreds of billions of dollars in a 10-year plus time horizon. Maybe even less than that, but I don't know. They've got a lot of work to do still. They do. It's not like everything is quantitatively set in stone. And it'd be interesting to see what the guidance is next year. However, the value of that is absolutely enormous. And then what's the downside? The downside is if HIMS go bankrupt, you lose your money. But if you invest now, you lose your money investing with a market cap of 10 billion. So that's a very powerful long-term advantage. And I can feel the conviction in both Dudum and Yemi's voice. And this is what you've got to remember, is HIMS was founded in 2017. I always make this point. It crossed $1 billion of annual revenue in 6.5 years. And now we're 8 years down the line. We're exactly 8 years from HIMS founding. They've already crossed 2 billion in annual revenues, right? Because they're doing nearly 600 million a quarter now. And that is testament to the management team. It really, really is testament to what they're building. And the last point is they're free cash flow positive. They managed to raise this billion, 0% interest rates. So they're in an extremely good financial position, growing very fast. HIMS are the largest player in what they do, completely disrupting the legacy healthcare industry. And now it's just a massive flywheel. I don't know how much cash Roe or one of the other private providers has. LifeMD, their growth has slowed massively, and LifeMD were actually founded before HIMS, and they just haven't got the same scale. They haven't got the same kind of just drive to really grow. Their revenue is 100 and something or 200 and something million a year, and they're forecasted to grow 20% this year. And when HIMS just have access to that capital, and then they can obtain more data points and deploy new medicines all the time and help more people, that's just going to create an extremely powerful flywheel, like a one-stop shop subscription service to keep people healthy and happy. So I love the direction that this is being taken. It's a very long-term thesis, and all I'll say to the management team, I wish them the very best of luck. It's exciting to watch this endeavor from the sidelines because, of course, I'm not actively influencing HIMS as a company, but to also have a little piece of it as a shareholder is a very exciting journey. And I hope anyone else, whether you're a shareholder or not, you enjoy this journey too.